I stood in the doorway of the Wellington, watching my sister Sarah glow in her designer maternity dress, while every chair at her baby shower was deliberately occupied. When she spotted me, her smile turned wicked. "Why don't you try that dirty pub across the street?" she suggested sweetly. My mother Amanda nodded approvingly. "It suits you perfectly." The room fell silent, waiting for my reaction. I gripped my leather briefcase tighter, smiled calmly, and said, "I'll do that." As I turned toward the door, I caught their satisfied expressions in the mirror. They had no idea what was coming. Walking into the Wellington that Saturday afternoon had felt like stepping back into every childhood memory I'd tried to forget. The restaurant reeked of old money and older grudges, its mahogany paneling, and crystal chandeliers creating the perfect backdrop for family drama. I'd grown up as the overlooked middle child, while Sarah basked in the spotlight as the golden daughter. Every achievement I'd earned was dismissed, every setback magnified. Today was supposed to be different. Today, I'd hoped my success might finally earn their respect. Instead, I found myself staring at a carefully orchestrated humiliation. The seating arrangement wasn't an accident. Every chair around the elegantly set tables was filled with Sarah's wealthy friends, their designer handbags draped over empty seats that could have accommodated me. Aunt Patricia, resplendent in her pearl necklace, had spread her coat across 2 chairs. Uncle Robert occupied a corner spot, his golf clubs propped against a vacant seat beside him. Cousins Jessica and Tyler had claimed an entire table for their purses and phones, scrolling through social media while ignoring my presence. Sarah floated between tables in her $1,500 maternity dress, her hand constantly caressing her growing belly as if performing for an audience. Her husband Marcus, an investment banker with perfectly styled hair and a Rolex that cost more than most people's cars, barely glanced up from his conversation about stock portfolios. The guests whispered among themselves, their voices carrying just loud enough for me to hear fragments about poor career choices and failed ventures. My mother Amanda commanded attention from the head table, her voice sharp as she regaled the crowd with stories of my supposed disappointments. "Davy's been playing with computers for years," she announced, waving her manicured hand dismissively. "Still waiting for him to get a real job." The laughter that followed felt like glass breaking in my chest. I'd arrived carrying my worn leather briefcase, the same one I'd used through college and kept through years of building my company. To them, it probably looked like a desperate attempt to appear professional. They couldn't see the documents inside the contracts worth more money than they could imagine the proof of success they'd refused to acknowledge. Sarah approached me with predatory grace, her smile never wavering. "Oh, Davy, I'm so sorry. We just didn't have room for everyone." She gestured around the restaurant as if the space had somehow shrunk since the invitations were sent. "But there's that little place across the street. I'm sure they'd welcome someone like you." Marcus chuckled from his seat. "Might be more your speed anyway, buddy. Less pressure to keep up appearances." The cruelty wasn't spontaneous. This was calculated, planned, designed to put me in my place before Sarah's baby arrived. They wanted to establish a hierarchy where I'd forever be the family disappointment unworthy of sitting at their table. The other guests watched with uncomfortable fascination, some looking embarrassed by the display while others seemed entertained by the family drama. Uncle Robert leaned back in his chair, his voice booming across the room. "Nothing wrong with knowing where you belong, nephew. Character building, really." Cousin Jessica looked up from her phone long enough to smirk. "Maybe they'll have a job opening. You could ask while you're there." Tyler snickered, adding, "Bet they don't even check references." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Murphy's Tavern across the street. Its weathered brick exterior and simple wooden sign looked humble compared to the Wellington's ostentatious facade. But something about its honest appearance appealed to me more than all the artificial elegance surrounding me now. I stood there absorbing their words, feeling the familiar sting of family rejection. But this time was different. This time, I had the power to change everything. The briefcase in my hand contained documents that would shift the entire balance of our relationship. Legal papers, financial statements, contracts that proved everything they believed about me was wrong. My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. Don't just stand there looking lost, Davy. We have important people here who shouldn't be disturbed by awkwardness. The room fell silent again, everyone waiting to see how I'd respond to this final insult. Sarah's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, convinced she'd delivered the perfect blow. Marcus adjusted his tie, smugly proud of his wife's performance. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some beginning to recognize that they were witnessing something ugly. I looked around the room one last time, memorizing their faces, their expressions, their complete certainty that they'd won. Then I smiled calm and controlled my voice steady as I spoke the words that would change everything. You know what? I'll do exactly that. Murphy's Tavern welcomed me with the warmth of aged wood and genuine hospitality. The moment I stepped through the heavy wooden door, I felt the difference between this place and the cold luxury I'd just left. Exposed brick walls told stories of decades past, while soft lighting from vintage fixtures created an atmosphere that invited conversation rather than competition. Behind the bar stood a man in his 60s, his weathered hands polishing a glass with practiced efficiency. Sean Murphy had the bearing of someone who'd seen life's ups and downs and emerged with his dignity intact. His eyes, sharp blue beneath graying brows, studied me with curiosity rather than judgment. "Welcome to Murphy's," he said, his voice carrying traces of Irish heritage mixed with American practicality. "What can I get for you?" I set my briefcase down and took a seat at the bar, immediately noticing how the worn wood felt more comfortable than the Wellington's upholstered chairs. "Whatever you recommend," I replied, still processing the contrast between the two establishments. Sean poured a perfectly crafted beer, the foam settling just right as he placed it before me. "You look like a man with something on his mind. Sometimes that's exactly what brings folks through our door." Around the tavern, I noticed the regular customers. An elderly woman named Helen sat in a corner booth grading papers with red pen, her gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her gentle face suggested decades of teaching, and she looked up occasionally to smile at other patrons. Near the window, a massive man in work clothes occupied a table, his calloused hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Big Mike, as Sean called him, had the solid presence of someone who built things for a living. A young woman emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of food. Katie Murphy, Sean's daughter, moved with efficient grace, her auburn hair tied back as she served customers with genuine care. Despite the tavern's modest surroundings, she carried herself with intelligence and determination that spoke of bigger dreams. Busy place, I observed, watching the easy interactions between staff and patrons. Sean's expression darkened slightly. "Not busy enough, I'm afraid. 30 years I've been building this community, and now we're 30 days from losing it all." The story unfolded like a tragedy in slow motion. Sean had opened Murphy's Tavern after returning from Vietnam, using his military savings and a small business loan to create something meaningful. For 4 decades, the pub had served as more than a restaurant. It was a gathering place where working people found friendship, where troubles were shared over honest drinks, where celebrations felt authentic rather than performative. Katie paused in her service to join our conversation, her eyes reflecting the same worry as her father's. "The building's been sold," she explained, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "New owners want us out. They've got other plans for this space." Through the window, I could see the Wellington's imposing structure, its valet parking, and elaborate entrance clearly visible. The luxury restaurant had prospered by catering to people who valued appearance over substance, status over community. Murphy's Tavern represented everything the Wellington was not: honest, welcoming, built on relationships rather than reputation. Sean continued polishing glass as a habit that seemed to calm his nerves. We've tried everything. Bank loans, private investors, even started a crowdfunding campaign. Nothing's worked. Katie here's been working 3 jobs trying to help save the place. I learned that Katie spent her days as a receptionist at a medical office, her evenings at the tavern, and her nights studying business administration at the community college. Her determination reminded me of my own younger years, working multiple jobs while building my first company in a garage apartment. Why not sell to a chain restaurant? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Katie's laugh held no humor. They don't want the business. They want the building empty, something about expanding parking for the fancy place across the street. That revelation hit me like a physical blow. From my seat at the bar, I had a clear view of the Wellington, where my family continued their celebration of my exclusion. The timing suddenly made sense. Sarah's choice of venue wasn't random. She'd brought her baby shower to this specific location, knowing that the family sitting in luxury was directly connected to the destruction of the community gathering place across the street. Helen approached the bar, her school papers tucked under her arm. Sean, you've been like family to this whole neighborhood. When my husband passed 5 years ago, this place kept me sane. Every Tuesday night, you'd have a seat saved for me, a warm meal ready, and ears willing to listen. Big Mike nodded from his table. Man gave me work when I got out of prison. Nobody else would take a chance on an ex-felon, but Sean saw something worth believing in. Fixed my life, this place did. A third patron, a woman in medical scrubs who'd just finished a shift, added her voice to the conversation. Linda worked as a nurse practitioner at the local clinic, and she'd often bring patients here for unofficial counseling sessions. You can't replace what this place means to people, she said. It's not just a restaurant, it's where this community comes together. As I listened to their stories, my anger at my family's behavior transformed into something more complex. These people embodied the values my family claimed to respect: hard work, loyalty, genuine care for others. Yet my family would destroy this place without a second thought, all for the convenience of easier parking at their precious luxury restaurant. Sean refilled my glass, his movements betraying the weight of impending loss. 40 years of building something meaningful, and it'll all be gone in a month. Katie's got her whole life ahead of her, though. That's what matters. Through the window, I watched expensive cars pull up to the Wellington's valet station. My family and their guests emerged from air-conditioned vehicles, stepping directly onto red carpets that protected their designer shoes from touching actual pavement. The contrast between their insulated existence and the raw humanity surrounding me in Murphy's Tavern couldn't have been sharper. Katie wiped down nearby tables, her movements automatic, as her mind clearly wrestled with the future. I keep thinking there's got to be a solution we haven't tried yet. Some way to make the numbers work, find an investor who understands what we're really doing here. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sitting in my briefcase not 3 feet away were documents that could solve every problem they faced. But they didn't know who I was, what I'd built, or the power I had to change their circumstances. To them, I was just another customer seeking refuge from life's disappointments. Sean's eyes met mine across the bar. Forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, but you look like someone who understands what it means to build something from nothing. That briefcase, the way you carry yourself. You're not just running away from whatever happened across the street. You're running towards something. His perception caught me off guard. While my family saw failure, this stranger recognized potential. While they dismissed my achievements, he sensed the weight of responsibility I carried. The contrast made my family's treatment sting even more, but it also reminded me why I'd chosen to live modestly despite my success. Real people like Sean and Katie mattered more than the superficial approval of relatives who valued wealth over character. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the tavern floor, I found myself reluctant to leave this authentic warmth for the cold calculation waiting across the street. but I knew the confrontation was inevitable. My family expected me to slink away in defeat, tail between my legs, properly chastened by their public rejection. Instead, I was about to give them a lesson in the difference between inherited privilege and earned power. The documents in my briefcase would shift every assumption they'd made about our family hierarchy. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep their cruelty ran and how Marcus's legal connections tied into Murphy's impending destruction. Sean disappeared into his office and returned with a manila folder thick with legal documents. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he spread the papers across the bar, revealing a web of bureaucratic manipulation that made my stomach turn. The letterhead on most documents belonged to Harrison Caldwell and Associates, one of the city's most prestigious law firms. The name signing most of the correspondence made my blood run cold: Marcus Caldwell. "Your brother-in-law's been busy," I said, reading through the frivolous health code, violations, zoning challenges, and permit disputes that had systematically drained Murphy's resources over the past 6 months. Katie leaned over my shoulder, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Every time we fix one problem, 2 more appear. It's like they're creating issues just to create them." The pattern was clear and methodical. Marcus had filed complaints about Murphy's ventilation system, despite the tavern passing 3 separate inspections. He'd challenged their liquor license renewal over technicalities that had never been enforced against other establishments. Most recently, he'd initiated a zoning review claiming the tavern's outdoor seating violated neighborhood character standards. "Each challenge costs us money we don't have," Sean explained, pointing to legal bills that had mounted into the tens of thousands. "We've had to hire lawyers, pay for multiple inspections, file endless paperwork responses. It's death by 1,000 cuts." Helen approached the bar, having overheard our conversation. "The timing's not coincidental either. These challenges started right after the building sale was announced, like someone wanted to make sure we couldn't fight back effectively." Big Mike joined us, his massive frame casting a shadow over the documents. "I've seen this before in construction. When developers want a property, they make life miserable for existing tenants until they give up and leave. Saves them from paying fair buyouts." Linda added her perspective from the medical field. "It's like a chronic illness designed to weaken the patient until they can't resist the final blow. Very systematic, very calculated." As I read deeper into the files, the cruelty became even more apparent. Marcus had used his position at one of the city's most influential law firms to coordinate attacks from multiple directions. The health department inspections weren't random. They'd been specifically requested by his office. The zoning challenges weren't citizen complaints. They'd been filed by a shell company traced back to his firm. Katie pulled out another folder, this one containing financial documents that told an even grimmer story. "We applied for emergency business loans from 3 different banks. All denied, even though our credit and payment history are excellent. The rejection letters shared similar language about uncertain business climate and regulatory concerns." I recognized the subtle code words that suggested someone had been making calls, planting doubts about Murphy's viability with potential lenders. "My business professor says this kind of coordinated pressure usually means someone with significant influence wants you gone," Katie continued. "But we couldn't figure out why anyone would target a small neighborhood tavern." Sean's voice carried decades of disappointment. "Then we learned about the Wellingtons' expansion plans. They want to tear down this building and create a valet parking area with covered walkways. Our little pub is standing in the way of their grand vision." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Sarah's baby shower wasn't just held at the Wellington by coincidence. The luxury restaurant was the beneficiary of Murphy's destruction, and Marcus was the architect of the tavern's downfall. My family had chosen this location specifically to celebrate, while the community institution they were destroying struggled across the street. "The cruelest part," Katie said, her voice barely above a whisper, "is that we found out about the parking expansion from a newspaper article. No one even bothered to tell us directly what they were planning. I studied the expansion drawings that had been published in the business section. The proposed development would create an elegant outdoor dining space with fountains, sculpture gardens, and premium parking for the Wellington's wealthy clientele. Murphy's Tavern, with its 40 years of community history, was marked simply as demolition site. Helen sat down heavily in a nearby chair. I've been coming here since Sean opened. Watched Katie grow up, celebrated her graduation, mourned lost friends at these tables. You can't just replace that kind of history with decorative landscaping. Big Mike's hands clenched into fists. Man spent his whole life building something good, and they're destroying it for parking spaces. That ain't right. Linda nodded grimly. The worst part is how they're doing it. If they just made a fair offer, Sean might have considered selling. Instead, they're trying to force him out, broke and broken. As I absorbed the full scope of the manipulation, my family's behavior took on new dimensions of cruelty. They hadn't just excluded me from the baby shower. They'd chosen to celebrate at the exact location that would profit from destroying this community gathering place. Marcus wasn't just Sarah's husband, he was the lawyer systematically dismantling Sean's life's work. Katie showed me her laptop, where she'd been tracking the legal challenges and their costs. I've been working 3 jobs to help cover these bills. Days at Dr. Peterson's clinic, as a receptionist, evenings here at the tavern, and weekends cleaning offices downtown. Still not enough to keep up with the legal fees. Her night school transcripts were impressive dean's list in business administration, despite working 60 hours a week. She'd written her senior project on sustainable small business development using Murphy's Tavern as her case study. The irony of studying how to save the family business while it was being systematically destroyed wasn't lost on either of us. I applied to business school, she admitted quietly. Got accepted to 3 programs but had to turn them all down. Can't afford tuition when we're fighting just to stay open another month. Sean's pride in his daughter was evident despite their circumstances. Katie's got more brains than most of the lawyers trying to shut us down. She'll figure out a way forward even if it means starting over somewhere else. Through the window, I could see the Wellington's valet attendants directing traffic around expensive cars. Luxury sedans and sports cars filled the spaces that would soon expand into Murphy's location. My family's celebration continued inside, oblivious to the human cost of their evening's entertainment. The contrast between the 2 establishments had never been starker. The Wellington served people who valued exclusivity and status, charging premium prices for the privilege of feeling superior to others. Murphy's Tavern served working people who valued authenticity and community, offering honest food and genuine friendship at prices they could afford. Katie closed her laptop with resignation. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to have family with real influence people who could help instead of just offering sympathy. But I guess that's not how the world works for people like us. Her words hit me harder than any of my family's insults. This remarkable young woman, brilliant enough for business school and dedicated enough to work 3 jobs, believed that powerful people existed only to benefit themselves. My family had reinforced that belief through their systematic destruction of everything she and her father had built. Sean gathered the legal documents back into their folder, the weight of impending defeat visible in his shoulders. 30 days left, and then 40 years of work disappears. At least Katie's young enough to start over somewhere else. As I sat surrounded by the evidence of my brother-in-law's calculated cruelty, my anger crystallized into determination. These people had shown me more respect in 2 hours than my family had in 28 years. They'd welcomed a stranger, shared their stories, treated me with dignity despite my obvious distress. My family expected me to accept their rejection and disappear quietly into the background. Instead, I was about to demonstrate the difference between inherited privilege and earned power. The briefcase beside me contained documents that would not only save Murphy's Tavern, but transform it into something greater than anyone could imagine. But first, I wanted them to see exactly who they'd chosen to destroy and exactly how wrong they'd been about the powerless stranger who'd wandered into their community seeking refuge from family cruelty. I set my briefcase on the bar and opened it slowly, revealing documents that would shatter every assumption the Murphy family had made about the disappointed man seeking refuge in their tavern. The morning's Wall Street Journal lay on top, my photograph prominent on the business section's front page. Beneath the headline, Connect Flow IPO exceeds expectations. Founder becomes youngest tech billionaire in state history. Sean's eyes widened as he recognized my face in the newspaper photo. Katie dropped the glass she'd been cleaning, the sound of breaking crystal echoing through the suddenly quiet tavern. The other patrons gathered around as I spread financial documents, SEC filings, and corporate contracts across the bar's worn surface. "My name is David Connor," I said, using my full legal name that appeared on all business documents. "But everyone here has called me Davy since childhood, the nickname my family uses when they want to diminish my accomplishments." The revelation rippled through the tavern like an earthquake. Helen gasped, her hands flying to cover her mouth. Big Mike whistled low under his breath. Linda stared at the documents with the focused attention of someone accustomed to processing complex information quickly. Katie picked up the newspaper, studying my photograph with growing amazement. "Connect Flow. I've been reading about your company for months in business class. The social media platform that connects local communities with small businesses. You revolutionized how people find and support neighborhood establishments." Sean's weathered hands trembled as he examined the corporate documents. $2 billion valuation, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and your family treats you like a failure. I pulled out my laptop and showed them Connect Flow's real impact: over 50 million users worldwide, partnerships with 30,000 small businesses, community engagement programs that had saved hundreds of establishments like Murphy's Tavern. The platform I'd built in my garage apartment 6 years ago had grown into one of the most influential community-focused technologies in the world. They dismiss it as playing with computers. I explained, hearing the bitterness in my own voice. My mother tells people I'm wasting time on nonsense. Sarah calls me unemployed when talking to her friends. Big Mike shook his head in disbelief. Man's worth more money than God, and they're making him feel worthless. That's some twisted family dynamics right there. Through the tavern's windows, I could see movement at the Wellington. My business manager, Jennifer Chen, had arrived with a team of assistants, their expensive cars drawing attention from the restaurant's valet staff. She'd received my text message asking her to bring contracts for a new community development project, but she didn't know the specifics yet. Katie stared at ConnectFlow's user interface on my laptop screen. "This is the platform Dr. Peterson's been telling me about. He said it tripled his patient referrals by connecting him with community members who needed medical care but couldn't afford big hospital systems." Helen nodded enthusiastically. "My former students use this to find tutoring work and connect with families who need educational support. It's been a godsend for teachers trying to make ends meet on retirement incomes." Linda added, "The clinic where I work gets most of our new patients through ConnectFlow now. People trust recommendations from neighbors more than corporate advertising." Sean studied the financial documents with the careful attention of someone who'd spent decades managing a small business. "According to these papers, you could buy the Wellington and everything around it without affecting your net worth significantly." The irony wasn't lost on any of us. While my family celebrated excluding me from their exclusive gathering, I possessed the financial power to purchase the entire building where they were humiliating me. But wealth had never been the point. I'd built ConnectFlow to strengthen communities like the one surrounding Murphy's Tavern. Jennifer entered the pub with her typical efficiency, her designer business suit contrasting sharply with the tavern's casual atmosphere. She carried a briefcase larger than mine, filled with contracts and legal documents for whatever project I'd summoned her to discuss. "David," she said, using my business name, "I've brought the community development contracts you requested, but I need more details about the location and scope of the project. I gestured toward Sean and Katie, then at the tavern around us. Jennifer, meet the Murphy family. They own this establishment, which is about to become the flagship location for ConnectFlow's new Community Roots initiative. Jennifer's expression shifted from confusion to comprehension to excitement as she understood what I was proposing. She'd been advocating for ConnectFlow to establish physical locations where our digital community building could translate into real-world gathering spaces. Katie looked between Jennifer and me, her business education helping her process the implications. You're talking about turning Murphy's Tavern into some kind of corporate community center. Not corporate, I corrected. Community-owned and community-operated, with ConnectFlow providing funding, technology, and business support. Sean remains the owner and operator, but with resources to expand your impact beyond anything you've imagined. Jennifer opened her briefcase and spread contracts across another table. We're prepared to offer a $2 million renovation, an expansion budget forgiveness of all current debts, and a $50,000 annual technology grant in perpetuity. Sean's knees buckled, and he had to grab the bar for support. 40 years of struggle, 30 days from losing everything, and suddenly someone was offering to transform his life's work into something greater than he'd ever dreamed. There's more. I continued pulling out scholarship documents. Katie, ConnectFlow's educational foundation will cover your full business school tuition at any university you choose, plus a guaranteed management position here when you graduate. Tears streamed down Katie's face as she read the scholarship terms. Full tuition, living expenses, internship opportunities, and mentorship from successful business leaders. Everything she'd sacrificed to try saving the tavern was suddenly within reach. Jennifer added, "We'll also establish Murphy's as our model for community-centered business development. Other cities will send representatives here to learn how to replicate your success." Helen clapped her hands together. "This is like a miracle. Sean, you're not losing your life's work. You're seeing it transformed into something that can help communities everywhere." Big Mike nodded approvingly. Man deserves this kind of recognition. He's been building community here longer than most folks have been alive. Through the window, I could see confusion spreading at the Wellington. My family had noticed the expensive cars arriving at Murphy's Tavern, the obvious signs of significant business activity. Sarah pressed her face against the glass, trying to understand what was happening in the supposedly inferior establishment across the street. Marcus appeared at the Wellington's entrance, his banker's instincts recognizing the signs of major financial transactions. His expression changed from puzzlement to concern as he spotted Jennifer's team and realized the scale of whatever was happening at Murphy's. Linda laughed with pure joy. "Do you realize what this means? This tavern's going to become famous. People will come from all over the country to see how community development actually works." Jennifer spread out architectural plans for the expansion project. "We're thinking of adding a business incubator space, community meeting rooms, a commercial kitchen for local food entrepreneurs, and a technology center where people can learn digital skills." Katie studied the plans with growing excitement. "We could host small business workshops, community organizing meetings, job training programs. Turn this place into the real heart of the neighborhood." Sean wiped tears from his eyes, his voice thick with emotion. 40 years I've been trying to build something meaningful, and you're telling me it's going to become a model for the whole country." "Not just the country," I replied. "ConnectFlow operates internationally. Murphy's Tavern will become a template for community development worldwide." As word of the transformation spread through the tavern, regular customers gathered to witness the historic moment. The working-class people who'd made Murphy's their second home were about to see their community gathering place become a beacon of hope for similar neighborhoods everywhere. My family's shocked faces pressed against the Wellington's windows, their celebration forgotten as they tried to comprehend the impossible scene unfolding across the street. The man they'd humiliated and excluded was apparently conducting business worth millions of dollars in the dirty pub they'd mocked. But the financial transformation was only the beginning. The real revelation would come when they realized the full extent of Marcus's involvement in trying to destroy Murphy's Tavern, and how their legal attack on Sean and Katie had just placed them in direct conflict with one of the most powerful tech companies in America. Justice was about to be served, and it would taste sweeter than anything on the Wellington's overpriced menu. Jennifer's phone buzzed with an urgent message, and her expression shifted from excitement to grim satisfaction as she read the screen. "David, you need to see this. Marcus Caldwell's senior partner just called our legal department asking about ConnectFlow's involvement with Murphy's Tavern. The timing was perfect. Word of our business meeting had reached the Wellington faster than I'd anticipated, triggering exactly the response I'd hoped for. Through the tavern's windows, I could see panic spreading among my family as they recognized the implications of major corporate activity at the supposedly doomed establishment they'd mocked. Sean's face darkened as he understood what Jennifer's call meant. That snake's been trying to destroy us for months, and now he's worried about his own career. Katie pulled out her laptop and began researching Harrison Caldwell and Associates online. Their website lists Marcus as a junior partner specializing in real estate acquisition and zoning law. If ConnectFlow's lawyers start investigating his attacks on Murphy's, his career would be over, I finished. No law firm wants to be associated with unethical harassment of small businesses, especially when those businesses are connected to billion-dollar companies. Big Mike cracked his knuckles with anticipation. About time that suit-wearing weasel faced some consequences for his behavior. Jennifer made several calls while we watched, coordinating with ConnectFlow's legal team to investigate the systematic attacks on Murphy's Tavern. Within minutes, she had definitive proof that Marcus had violated multiple professional conduct standards in his quest to force Sean out of business. Linda pointed toward the Wellington, where my family's baby shower was dissolving into chaos. "Looks like word's getting out over there too. People are leaving." Indeed, several cars were departing the Wellington's valet area as guests began to understand they'd been celebrating at the center of an unethical business scheme. The local business community was small enough that news of Marcus's misconduct would spread rapidly among the professionals who formed my family's social circle. Helen gathered her papers and moved to a window table for a better view of the unfolding drama. "I've been teaching for 40 years, and I've never seen karma work this quickly." My phone rang with a call from the Wellington. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately, then again. After the fourth attempt, I finally answered. "Davy!" Sarah's voice was tight with panic. "What's going on over there? People are saying you're with some big company." "I'm having a business meeting," I replied calmly. "Enjoying the atmosphere at this lovely establishment you recommended." "This isn't funny," she snapped. "Marcus is freaking out. His boss is asking questions about Murphy's Tavern and some legal irregularities." I could hear Marcus in the background, his voice raised in argument with someone on his phone. The controlled banker's demeanor he'd displayed all afternoon was cracking under pressure. Perhaps Marcus should have considered the consequences before launching unethical attacks on local businesses, I suggested. Sarah's breathing became rapid and shallow. "What are you talking about? What attacks?" Through the Wellington's windows, I could see my mother, Amanda, approaching the phone, her face flushed with anger and confusion. She grabbed the device from Sarah, her voice shrill, as she demanded explanations. "David Connor, you stop this nonsense right now and come back where you belong," she ordered, using the authoritative tone that had intimidated me throughout childhood. "Actually, Mother, I'm exactly where I belong, with people who value substance over superficial status." Jennifer approached with her laptop open to ConnectFlow's corporate website. My photograph appeared prominently on the executive leadership page, along with details about the company's $2 billion valuation and community development initiatives. "Your son is conducting business," Jennifer said loudly enough for Amanda to hear through the phone. "As the founder and CEO of ConnectFlow, he's announcing a major community investment that will create jobs and economic development throughout this region. The silence on Amanda's end stretched for several seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its commanding edge. ConnectFlow, the technology company. Katie held up the Wall Street Journal with my photograph on the front page. The same son you've been telling people is unemployed just made the cover of the business section for becoming one of America's youngest billionaires. I could hear Amanda's sharp intake of breath, followed by frantic whispering as she shared this information with the remaining guests. The reality of my success was finally sinking in, along with the magnitude of their mistake in excluding me. Sean approached the phone with a grin. Ma'am, your son just saved 40 years of my life's work and transformed it into something that'll help communities across the globe. You raised a good man, though you don't seem to know it. Big Mike added his voice to the conversation. Man showed more class and character in 2 hours than most folks manage in a lifetime. You should be proud instead of whatever this is. Amanda's voice became small and uncertain. We didn't know. Davey never told us about his success. Because you never asked, I replied. You were too busy assuming I'd failed to consider that I might have succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. Through the window, I watched Marcus emerge from the Wellington, his phone pressed to his ear as he paced frantically in the valet area. His conversation grew more animated, his gestures more desperate, as he tried to explain his actions to what was clearly his senior partner. Jennifer received another call, this one, from our legal department. She listened intently, then ended the call with a satisfied smile. Marcus Caldwell has just been terminated by Harrison Caldwell and Associates. His senior partner said they can't afford to be associated with unethical business practices, especially involving companies of ConnectFlow's stature. Katie cheered, pumping her fist in victory. Justice served, no more frivolous lawsuits, no more harassment, no more systematic attacks on small businesses. Linda applauded from her table. That man's been making life miserable for honest working people all over this neighborhood. About time he faced consequences. Helen nodded approvingly. Good always triumphs over evil children. Sometimes it just takes longer than we'd like. My phone buzzed with text messages from various family members as word of Marcus's termination spread through the Wellington. Cousin Jessica sent desperate apologies. Uncle Robert inquired about investment opportunities. Aunt Patricia suddenly remembered how she'd always believed in my potential. But the message that interested me most came from Sarah. Please come back. We need to talk. Everything's falling apart here. I looked around Murphy's Tavern where genuine people were celebrating the salvation of something they'd built through decades of honest work. Then I looked across the street at the Wellington, where my family was finally confronting the consequences of their cruelty and arrogance. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Here, people celebrated the success of someone who'd lifted up their community. There, people panicked because their privileged world was suddenly threatened by the revelation of their own character flaws. Jennifer spread out more contracts on the table. We should formalize the Murphys partnership today. I'd like to have this announced in tomorrow's business press. Sean studied the documents with growing amazement. 40 years of struggling to keep this place alive, and now it's going to be featured in national newspapers as a model for community development. Not just featured, I corrected. It's going to be the flagship location for a nationwide program that will help thousands of small businesses thrive instead of merely survive. As the sun began to set over both establishments, the divergent paths of the evening became clear. Murphy's Tavern was ascending to national prominence as a beacon of community development. The Wellington was descending into scandal as news of Marcus's unethical practices spread through their wealthy clientele. My family had orchestrated their own destruction by targeting the wrong people for the wrong reasons. They'd assumed that power belonged only to those who displayed it ostentatiously, never considering that real influence often worked quietly behind the scenes until circumstances demanded its revelation. The lesson they were about to learn would reshape every assumption they'd made about success, failure, family loyalty, and the true source of power in American society. Marcus's downfall accelerated faster than even I had anticipated. Within an hour of Jennifer's legal team contacting Harrison Caldwell and Associates, the firm's senior partner William Harrison himself arrived at the Wellington, his face grim with the knowledge that his firm's reputation was in jeopardy. Through Murphy's windows, we watched the confrontation unfold. Harrison, a distinguished man in his 70s with silver hair and an impeccable suit, gestured angrily at Marcus, while holding what appeared to be a thick file of documents. Sarah stood beside her husband, her designer maternity dress wilted, now her earlier confidence replaced by obvious distress. Jennifer received updates from our legal department in real time. Harrison's reviewing every case Marcus has handled for the past year. Turns out Murphy's Tavern isn't the first small business he's targeted with questionable tactics. Sean poured himself a whiskey, his hands steadier now than they'd been in months. How many other families has that man tried to destroy? Katie pulled up news articles on her laptop showing 3 other local businesses that had closed after facing similar legal harassment from Marcus's firm. A family bakery, a used bookstore, and a neighborhood coffee shop had all been forced out by the same pattern of frivolous violations and zoning challenges. Pattern of misconduct. Jennifer noted reading from her legal team's report. The State Bar Association takes a very dim view of lawyers who systematically harass small businesses on behalf of corporate clients. Big Mike watched the scene across the street with grim satisfaction. That suit's about to learn what it feels like to have his whole life turned upside down by people with more power than him. Amanda appeared at the Wellington's entrance, her social facade cracking as she realized the magnitude of the scandal surrounding her son-in-law. Several cars were leaving the valet area as guests distanced themselves from the unfolding controversy. My phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, William Harrison's voice came through formal and carefully controlled. "Mr. Connor, this is William Harrison of Harrison Caldwell and Associates. I'm calling to personally apologize for my former associate's unconscionable conduct regarding Murphy's Tavern." Former associate, I asked, though Jennifer had already informed me of Marcus's termination. As of 20 minutes ago, Marcus Caldwell is no longer with our firm. We've also begun the process of reporting his conduct to the State Bar Association for investigation. Through the window, I could see Marcus slumped against a car, his phone pressed to his ear as he apparently received this news. Sarah stood beside him, her hands covering her face. Harrison continued. "We're prepared to immediately withdraw all legal challenges against Murphy's Tavern and cover any costs the business has incurred defending against these frivolous actions." Sean leaned closer to the phone, his voice steady despite his emotions. "That's a start, but it doesn't undo months of stress and financial hardship your lawyer put my family through." "You're absolutely right, sir. We're also prepared to make a substantial settlement payment to compensate for damages caused by our former associate's misconduct." Jennifer gestured for the phone, her negotiation instincts activated. "Mr. Harrison, this is Jennifer Chen, legal counsel for ConnectFlow. We'll need to see documentation of all actions taken against Murphy's Tavern, plus evidence that similar conduct hasn't affected other small businesses in your portfolio." "Of course. We're conducting a comprehensive review of all cases Mr. Caldwell handled. Any irregularities will be addressed immediately." As the legal arrangements were finalized, local news crews began arriving at both establishments. Word of ConnectFlow's community investment had reached the media, but now they were also covering the scandal of Marcus's unethical practices. Helen pointed toward the news vans. "This story's about to become very public. Your family's humiliation is going to be front-page news tomorrow." Katie refreshed her laptop screen where business news websites were already reporting ConnectFlow's partnership with Murphy's Tavern. The headlines portrayed the collaboration as a model for corporate community engagement, with my photograph appearing alongside images of the tavern. Linda shook her head in amazement. 24 hours ago, this place was 30 days from closing. Now it's going to be featured in business schools as an example of successful community development. The irony was perfect. My family's attempt to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly, transforming their private cruelty into public scandal while elevating the establishment they'd mocked into national prominence. A reporter from the local business journal entered Murphy's Tavern, followed by a photographer. Jennifer handled the media coordination while Sean and Katie shared the story of their near loss and dramatic salvation. "This tavern represents everything right about American community," Sean told the reporter. 40 years of bringing people together, and Mr. Connor understood that immediately. He saw what this place really meant to folks. Katie added, "ConnectFlow's investment isn't just about saving one business. It's about proving that community-centered development can work anywhere if someone cares enough to make it happen." The photographer captured images of the contracts being signed, the architectural plans for expansion, and the genuine joy on everyone's faces. These photos would appear in tomorrow's newspapers alongside very different images of Marcus's professional disgrace. My phone rang again, this time with Sarah's number. When I answered, her voice was barely controlled. "Davy, please. Marcus lost his job. People are leaving the shower. Mom's having some kind of breakdown. We need your help." I looked around Murphy's Tavern, where people who'd shown me genuine respect were celebrating the salvation of something they'd built with honest work. Then I looked across the street at the Wellington, where my family was finally experiencing consequences for their systematic cruelty. "Sarah, you chose this restaurant specifically because it was built on destroying Murphy's Tavern. You celebrated my humiliation while Marcus worked to destroy these good people's lives. Now you want my help." "We didn't know," she pleaded. "We didn't understand what Marcus was doing." "You understood perfectly that you were excluding me, insulting me, and treating me as worthless. The only thing you didn't understand was that I had the power to respond." Jennifer approached with final contracts ready for signature. The Murphy's Tavern Community Development Project was about to become official, launching a program that would help small businesses nationwide. Sean raised his whiskey glass in a toast. "To unexpected friends and long overdue justice." Big Mike lifted his coffee mug. "To folks who judge character instead of bank accounts." Helen added, "To the proof that good always triumphs even when evil seems to be winning." Katie held up her scholarship acceptance letter. "To second chances and dreams that finally come true." Linda joined the toast. "To communities that support each other instead of tearing each other down." As we clinked glasses and mugs together, photographers captured the moment for tomorrow's newspapers. The images would show genuine celebration, authentic relationships, and the joy that comes from lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. Across the street, my family's baby shower had completely dissolved. Cars continued departing as guests distanced themselves from the scandal. Marcus sat alone at a table, his banking career likely over, along with his legal career. Sarah stood at the window, staring across at the celebration she'd inadvertently created by trying to destroy me. Justice had been served swift and complete. But the most satisfying part wasn't my family's downfall. It was the transformation of Murphy's Tavern from a struggling business into a beacon of hope that would inspire communities across America. The people who'd welcomed a stranger and treated him with dignity were about to become nationally recognized examples of how community development should work. The people who'd rejected family based on superficial assumptions were about to become cautionary tales about the consequences of casual cruelty. 6 months later, I stood in the transformed Murphy's Tavern Community Center, watching Sean mentor a young entrepreneur who'd driven 300 miles to learn about sustainable small business development. The renovation had preserved everything authentic about the original tavern while adding spaces that served the broader community's needs. The business incubator occupied the former storage area where Katie now managed programs for startup companies focusing on community development. Her business school graduation photo hung prominently near the bar, alongside images of other success stories the center had fostered. Helen led a literacy program in the new education wing, teaching adults who'd never had the chance to develop reading skills. Her former students regularly volunteered as tutors, creating connections across generations and educational backgrounds. Big Mike supervised the construction apprenticeship program training young people in trades while they worked on community improvement projects. His patience and skill had transformed several at-risk teenagers into confident workers with bright futures. Linda coordinated the community health initiative, bringing medical services directly to people who couldn't afford traditional health care. The tavern's authentic atmosphere helped patients feel comfortable discussing sensitive health issues. ConnectFlow's Community Roots program had expanded to 47 locations nationwide, each modeled after Murphy's success. Business schools sent students here to study community-centered development. Politicians referenced our model in speeches about economic growth that benefits working families. The financial transformation was equally remarkable. Sean's personal debt had been eliminated, Katie's education fully funded, and the staff expanded to include 12 full-time employees drawn from the neighborhood. The tavern's revenue had tripled while maintaining its character as a gathering place for working people. My family's transformation had been more painful, but equally necessary. Marcus's legal career had ended permanently, but he'd found work as a compliance officer for a nonprofit organization, earning less money, but finally contributing to society positively. The experience had humbled him, forcing recognition that his privileged position had been built on harming others. Sarah's baby had been born healthy, and she'd reached out tentatively to rebuild our relationship. The process was slow and required genuine acknowledgement of how deeply her cruelty had wounded me. But parenthood had taught her about unconditional love, making her more capable of recognizing the damage conditional acceptance had caused. Amanda had perhaps changed most dramatically. She now volunteered at the community center twice weekly initially from guilt, but gradually from genuine appreciation for the values she'd overlooked in her own son. Her social circle had shrunk but become more authentic as fair-weather friends departed and real relationships developed. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia had made anonymous donations to community development programs, their contributions funding scholarships for disadvantaged students. They'd learned that real generosity required humility, not public recognition. Cousins Jessica and Tyler had pursued education and personal growth instead of seeking shortcuts through family connections. Jessica became a social worker focusing on community organizing. Tyler started a small business supporting local food producers. The broader lessons resonated far beyond our family drama. Murphy's Tavern had become proof that authentic communities could thrive when people chose substance over superficial status. The model attracted visitors from around the world, each taking home strategies for strengthening their own neighborhoods. ConnectFlow's mission had evolved beyond connecting businesses with customers to fostering genuine community relationships. The platform now facilitated everything from neighborhood skill sharing to local investment cooperatives, proving that technology could strengthen rather than replace human connections. Sean approached the bar, where I sat reviewing quarterly reports, his movements easier now without the weight of impending loss. David, you've given me more than a successful business. You've shown me that 40 years of work meant something beyond what I ever imagined. Katie joined us, her MBA now complete, and her management skills transforming how community development projects operated. The best part is seeing other neighborhoods replicate what we've built here. Every new Community Roots location represents families who won't lose their gathering places to corporate expansion. Through the renovated windows, the Wellington was visible across the street, its business significantly diminished after the scandal. Several of its former employees now worked at Murphy's, having discovered that authentic hospitality was more rewarding than exclusive service. Helen gathered her literacy students around a corner table, their proud smiles reflecting the confidence that came from new skills. Reading isn't just about words, she explained to them. It's about having the tools to understand and change your world. Big Mike supervised apprentices installing solar panels on the community center's roof, the project funded by ConnectFlow's sustainability initiative. Building something that lasts requires solid foundations, he told them. Same principle applies to communities and character. Linda consulted with a patient who'd been reluctant to seek medical care at traditional facilities. The tavern's welcoming atmosphere had convinced her to address health issues she'd been ignoring for years. Sometimes healing requires feeling safe first. Linda explained to nursing students who observed the program. The regular customers who'd welcomed me 6 months ago now served as community leaders, their wisdom valued by business consultants and urban planners. Their transformation from overlooked residents to recognized experts demonstrated how much talent existed in working-class neighborhoods when given proper support. ConnectFlow's stock price had doubled since announcing the Community Roots initiative, proving that ethical business practices could generate superior returns. Investors increasingly sought opportunities that created social value alongside financial profits. As evening approached, I reflected on the journey from that humiliating baby shower to this thriving community center. The pain of family rejection had led me to find my real family among people who valued character over status, substance over superficial appearances. My wealth had become a tool for lifting others rather than elevating myself above them. Success meant creating opportunities for people like Katie to pursue dreams they'd thought impossible. Power meant having the ability to protect communities from exploitation by those who saw profit in their destruction. The greatest satisfaction came from knowing that Murphy's model was replicating across the country, each location representing hundreds of families whose gathering places would be preserved and strengthened rather than destroyed for corporate convenience. Sean raised his evening whiskey in a familiar toast. To unexpected friends and lasting communities. The sentiment had become our motto, carved into the wooden sign above the bar. Visitors often asked about its meaning, and we tell them the story of how rejection led to acceptance, how exclusion led to inclusion, how apparent defeat led to unprecedented victory. The lesson resonated beyond individual circumstances. In a society increasingly divided by economic inequality, Murphy's Tavern proved that bridges could be built between different social classes when people chose connection over separation, community over competition. What do you think creates stronger communities, exclusive spaces that reinforce divisions between people, or inclusive gathering places that bring different backgrounds together? Have you ever experienced a moment when being excluded from something led you to discover where you really belonged? I'd love to hear your stories about finding authentic community in unexpected places. Thank you for following this journey from exclusion to belonging, from rejection to acceptance. Remember that your true family consists of people who value your character, not those who judge your circumstances. Support the local businesses and gathering places that build community in your neighborhood, because these spaces create the connections that make life meaningful. If this story inspired you to think differently about community and family, please like this video, subscribe for more stories about finding strength through adversity, and share this message with someone who needs to know that their worth isn't determined by others' recognition. Together, we can build communities where everyone has a seat at the table.